Just once in my life, I want to make an entrance this grand. I don't know where it would be. I don't know what context it would be appropriate. I'm not going to be ever on a stage like this, but, you know, like maybe at a Starbucks. There is something I want to point out here. I want to point out that these lower notes, as you age, your vocal folds get larger and longer. These lower notes are particularly awesome because she would not have had this luscious of tone when she was younger. The other thing that's cool about the melody here is that in the background, there's just this one note playing from an instrument. Anya, I'm trying to focus. There's this one note that's playing that's an instrument. And the melody here, the interval here outlines a harmony with that instrument. So that's what's really cool about it. Good melody writing does this. Because rhythm is so important to this song, it's important that when she starts a word with a vowel, that she treat it very specifically. Because if you have like an M or wa, right, Y, you need to do an abrupt onset. So let's take a look at what that would look like after I put down my dog. Good. So when we have consonants, Y, okay, we can see that these are gradual, right? There's not a big flat line and then a decay. I guess it would be this way because the mirrored the camera. But anyway, so there's a big difference between this. Y, tie, by. You can see the differences here as I go here for the T and the B. So how do we fix that? When we have a rhythmic passage, how do we put an initial attack on consonants that inherently don't have it? We use a glottal, which is the folds suddenly coming together. Now, it does look a little different. So now I do M. My. You can see that when I open my mouth, my folds kind of come together in a much stronger fashion. This is what the sudden onset is. Now, the problem with this and what the difficulty is doing it this way, your M has to be early. It has to be before the beat. Something similar happens with Y, but W is not necessarily a consonant as much as it's called a diphthong. It's two vowels at once. Right? So it's actually a little easier to have an abrupt onset in this instance. Not the greatest sound, but you get the point, right? So that's what she's doing here to make all this work. I just like that. I think it's interesting. You can hear on hard too. Hard versus hard, right? Very, very different between the two. There's one particular, this is getting really into the weeds here. When we talk about sudden onsets with Mariah, we have to keep in mind that the nodules are there. And what the sound is, I don't think it's a bad thing. The sound quality of it is, I think, like super idiomatic and distinct. I'm gonna find it. That. Huh. It's like this weird crack. It's so when she does high. Right? It's really cool. And it's something you would need nodules to pull off. So if we do an aspirate abrupt, which is what that is. Okay, if we did an aspirate abrupt, it will sound like this. Ha, ha, very sudden, very straight, right? But when you listen to Mariah, you get a little something different. It's like a little bit of a leak, and it's more vulnerable, I think. It sounds really cool. And this is, again, one of those things that you would need Nodules to pull off. Watch how that word high is not anywhere near as clean. The stop on mine was very clean. Notice how it's like a little bit just like a it's not a bad strain. It's just a really cool sound. Like it's like this weird crack. And it's like when you listen to Mariah and you listen for that, like you realize like, wow, like unless you have Nodules, you can't do that. So it's really cool that she uses it so often. And you can hear on me too, exactly what we were talking about further before. She's doing more of it now too, so it's not just that before it was a little lighter and she would sustain it afterwards. And this is where it comes in really big, because now it's not just on the onset, it's on the offset. So the onset is the start of a note, and the offset is the end of the note. And so she's doing glottals in the beginning and the end to stop the sound immediately. To the degree, because when you stop your folds, you're stopping your exhale. So the degree that which she's using it is so intense that you actually, when on the word deep, you don't hear a P. Right? You don't hear a P because she's closing her folds to give this rhythm. And again, this is the thing only Mariah or anybody doing an offset glottal with Nodules can do. That me, you see how it, like, when we're doing deep, like how it stopped immediately? That little bit of that leaks, it's just so cool. And then even on the aspirate abrupt, which I think we already talked about, but let's just make sure we remember. Aspirate abrupts look like this. Ha, ha, versus right? So it's the same thing that's happening here. Let's just make sure. Yep, that's good. See that? Ha, that vulnerable sound. I'm new to Mariah Land. I don't know when this song was written. But I do want to give quick attention to something that I think she gets unnecessarily, like, bad. People always think that they got the Mariah I got you, right? They think they have the I got you moment. I will address this, but I want you to notice something, okay? And I want you to know this. Just keep this in mind. When an opera singer ages, it is expected, and it would be bizarre if you did not change your rep. That Mariah Carey, as she ages, still sings the stuff that she wrote for herself in the 90s, which is brutal. It's really difficult to sing that stuff now, when her folds are larger, when the instrument has changed, and particularly after you have kids. The fact that she's still able to sing her old repertoire is nuts. But the good thing, like I said before, the lower notes are really lush in a way that they were not before. There's one in the videos that we've covered so far. When she would be in her low range and trying to tie a phrase together, she would use what's called the proximity effect. And I'll show you what that sounds like. You can see that as I'm closer, that low note is like white hot. The more teal, the brighter it is, the higher the volume, okay? So that's what she was doing when she was younger, was really getting up on it and pursing her lips, making that low note super loud to make up for the fact that her voice didn't really go that low and while maintaining her power. So that was what she did. Right? Here, she's not doing that at all. She's doing what people with lower voices do, and it's lush. So if I do that proximity thing again, the first one is me trying to get the loudest lower frequency that I can, right? And it worked. That one little part, maybe the second one above it, is pretty white hot. But it didn't sound good, did it? It doesn't sound lush. It sounds like not good. So, and Mariah would do it like sparingly, like when she was at the bottom of a run or bottom of a phrase. That's not what we're getting right now. What we're getting is much more lush. So that's the second one. You can see these upper harmonics are far more present and far louder, as well as being far more numerous. Let's listen to what it sounds like again. So it sounds a little bit more delicate, but it's also more audible. And let's pay attention to that while she's doing it. Oh, now we're gonna do the highlight. Here, hold on. Let's listen to the low real quick, just so we see it, what we're talking about, and then we'll go to these high notes. Don't you worry about it. We're gonna talk about the high notes. I know the Mariah fans hate me if I didn't. But you hear how that's different? It's way more lush and way more easy. But let's talk about the high notes, because the people like to freak out about those. Her belts have always been remarkably clean. And the reason why they're clean is because her breath, the way she manages her breath is immaculate. I don't think the nodules become a factor when you belt, because as you tilt your cricoid cartilage, which is like the lower part of your larynx, right? It's the low part of the larynx. You tilt it, you belt, okay? What that does is it makes your folds real fat, and they come together real fat. Nodules are little protrusions, little calluses on top of the folds. But that doesn't mean you can't, like if you have two calluses on your fingers and you put them together, right? You'll still get a seal, right? It's malleable. It's not like a rock. And it's just a bunch of callus. So the way that she's always had to hit her high notes has been very gentle, because otherwise they'll blow open and the folds will thin too much, and and then your nodules come into effect. As she ages, she has to do it even more accurately. How do I know this? It is really just the pure amount of volume that she doesn't have right now on her high notes. That's not a knock. It is very difficult to make a belt. Well, first of all, belts cannot be quiet. So to rein back something that's already fundamentally loud takes a ridiculous amount of precision. They're short belts, and they're very delicate. They don't sound delicate because it's a belt, but the technique behind that is very precise. It is so worth pointing out. I like to pick on people in the singing subreddit, because they make a post where they're really proud and they're like, "I've hit my highest note to date." Ah! And someone has to sit them down and be like, "Listen, if you hit it like Tarzan, it's not mission accomplished." Where the difficulty comes in with where high notes become truly difficult is when they're in the context of a phrase, and in particular, you have to sustain these high notes in what's called a tessitura, the average note value range in where you're singing in the phrase, right? What Mariah is doing right now is a high tessitura. She is sustaining higher notes and then moving around to more high notes. And it's done very well. At no point are any of the high notes airy. At no point are they abrasive. And they're also not flat. Why does this matter? Well, we're going to talk about that. Science! Are not airy. That's a very, very particular quality. When you belt, you don't want what a lot of people would call a mix. When you belt, you want your folds to completely close every oscillation, every time they do this to make a sound, okay? If you don't, you're blowing so hard that they might not come together entirely, and so air leaks. And it's pretty clear when that happens, but just in case we have the graph. And you're not there. Yeah, hold on. And you're not there. There we go. That's very breathy. So, you can see it, right? All that fuzz. That's not what you want. She has to be, in her older age, her high notes have to be done with very, very much precision. As she blows too much air, this will happen. She has to thin out her folds more than she ever used to, which means she can't tilt her cricoid cartilage as much. Because when she does that, they're going to be so thick that she can't go up that high. That's why her high notes later in life sound lighter. Her higher belts sound lighter. It's because she can't tilt the cricoid cartilage as much. That would happen. What we just saw would be what would happen. And that is not, as we just heard, it's not a nice sound to have. So that's literally why she has to make fundamental changes. And this is why I love and respect her technique. This is how good she is. She makes adjustments. I don't know if I said this earlier, but opera singers do not stay on their same repertoire. Not after childbirth and not after a decade. The fact that she's still doing it is cray-cray. Can I use that word? I feel like I just ruined that word with my whiteness. Can I say cray-cray? Oh, whatever. We've already done that. Let's continue listen to this. That's actually really impressive. The reason why that's impressive, any consonant that builds up pressure makes it very, very difficult to sing a high note after. Because you want less air when you go high, the folds are literally thinner. And just like we demonstrated before with all that fuzziness, if you put too much air behind a high note, you get all that fuzziness. And then it sounds not epic, it sounds more like a mix, right? Or even shouty. So this T, where the pressure builds up, she's right on the money. That's so intense, it's almost pushed. It's like the maximum you can go without pushing or getting that breath. And that's really interesting because we were talking about how her high notes have become more gentle with age. Right? That's not crazy belt town. But this, that power is there. When we go and look at her older belts, what we'll see without the fuzz is something akin to the middle right here, the middle of this, of the three, the second one. When you belt, it just kind of all the frequencies just are like really hot all the way up. When you belt really clean though, it's more uniform. And so because of the way that our ears are tuned, a belt doesn't have a lot of beef to it. It's just really hot in the upper frequencies. It's also hot in the low, but it's hot in the higher frequencies. And our ears are tuned to 1000 hertz and up, particularly with a bump at 3000 hertz. And this is where most belting sound happens, right? If it's at the same decibel level, but we hear it as human beings, those higher frequencies are louder to us. So why is this significant? When we listen to or hit these powerful belts, we can actually hear the lows. We can hear the lows. If we go back, I won't do it this time, but if we go back to her 90s performances when she's belting like this, it doesn't have that lower girth, which is a weird, uncomfortable word to use, and I kind of wish I didn't, but you get what I'm saying. So, about when I said that her high notes, that it was harder to, that's still true, but apparently, if we have a video game and it's called singing, and we put it on hard mode, we barely get through it, if we do at all. Mariah puts it on murder mode and then says, hey, I don't even need the extra lives. I don't even need any quarters. I'm just going to waltz through it. Because this is what waltzing through, make no mistake, higher notes are very difficult. Like, what I said is still correct, even though she's dunking on everything I said with being really good and making it basically like, oh, you said, I mean, like, yes, I did, and it's true, but it's her being good that makes me look like an idiot. I'm okay with that. You can tell at these higher, super preposterous high belts that the sustaining of that note takes a lot of concentration from her, but she sustains it. When, back to the people, if there's anyone on the singing subreddit that watches this, until you can sustain a note on every vowel, don't say that you can hit the note. You have to be able to sustain vowels. That's called singing. She doesn't just pop up to an absurdly high belt. She sustains it. That's ridiculous. So, once again, I feel compelled to practice in vain.